She tried to leave quietly, but he saw her little girl staring at his plate. The small diner on the corner of Maple and 3rd Street was the kind of place that smelled like coffee and comfort, where the booths had cracked, leather seats and the windows fogged up on cold evenings. And it was on one such cold Tuesday evening in late November that a woman named Sarah walked through the door, holding the hand of her 5-year-old daughter. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from. Lily, who had dark curly hair and the biggest brown eyes anyone had ever seen, and Sarah had not planned to come inside at all. She had only stepped in to ask for a glass of water because Lily had been coughing since the morning and the wind outside was biting and cruel. But the young waitress, a girl named Meg who wore her hair in a ponytail and always smiled too wide for a Tuesday, had waved them to a booth near the window and said, "Sit, no rush, just sit for a minute." And Sarah had not had the heart to say no because Lily's cheeks were pale and her small fingers were ice cold. So they sat, and Sarah opened the single laminated menu and looked at the numbers and felt her stomach drop the way it always did these days. Ever since David had left 7 months ago, taking the car and most of the savings account and leaving behind nothing but a box of old photographs and a pile of unpaid bills that seemed to grow taller every week. No matter how many extra shifts she picked up at the laundromat 2 blocks from their apartment. And Lily was looking at the menu too, not reading the words because she could not yet read, but looking at the pictures, her little finger tracing the image of a cheeseburger and a plate of golden fries with the kind of focus that only hungry children have. And Sarah felt a pain in her chest that had nothing to do with illness and everything to do with the specific and devastating helplessness of being a mother who cannot feed her child what the child is silently asking for. So she closed the menu and told Lily that they would eat at home tonight, that she was going to make the pasta Lily loved, the one with the butter and the little bit of cheese. And Lily did not argue because Lily was a good child who understood more than a 5-year-old should ever have to understand. And Sarah stood and was reaching for her coat when she noticed the man in the booth across from them, a large man in his 50s with grey at his temples and rough hands that suggested a life of outdoor work. And he had noticed Lily, or more specifically, he had noticed the way Lily's eyes had drifted to the plate of food that the waitress had just set down in front of him, a burger and fries and a small bowl of tomato soup. And the man was looking at Lily with an expression that Sarah could not immediately read. It was not pity exactly, it was something older and quieter than pity, something that looked almost like recognition. And for a moment the three of them existed in a small and private world while the diner rattled on around them with the clatter of cutlery and the low hum of conversation. And then the man raised his hand and caught Meg's eye and said quietly, "Bring whatever the little one wants and put it on my bill." And Sarah opened her mouth to refuse because she was a proud woman who had been raised to carry her own weight, and she did not want charity. She did not want anyone's pity. She did not want her daughter to grow up thinking they needed saving. But before she could speak, Lily had looked up at her with those enormous brown eyes, and Sarah saw something in them that stopped every word she had prepared. It was hope, small and fragile and very real, the kind of hope that a child carries without even knowing it is hope. And Sarah sat back down, and she said thank you quietly, the way people say thank you when the word carries far more weight than 2 syllables can hold. And the man nodded once as if it was nothing, as if he did this every Tuesday, and perhaps he did. Perhaps he was that kind of person. And Meg came back and took Lily's order, which was the cheeseburger and the fries and the chocolate milk, said with the solemn certainty of a child who has been thinking about this for a while. And while they waited, the man introduced himself as Walter. He said he had a daughter once about Lily's age. He said it in the past tense and did not explain further, and Sarah did not ask. But she understood that the past tense contained a world of loss that she could not touch. And instead she told him her name, and Lily told him her name, and Lily asked Walter if he liked dinosaurs, and Walter said he did, specifically the Triceratops. And Lily said that was a good choice, very seriously, as if she had been waiting her whole life for someone to get it right. And when the food came, Lily ate with a concentration and happiness that made Sarah's eyes sting. And Walter ate too, slowly, and they talked about small things, about the cold weather coming in, and about the school down the street, and about a stray cat that had been living near the diner for 2 winters now that Meg left scraps for every night. And when it was time to go, Walter paid the bill and left a tip. That made Meg's eyes go wide. And at the door, Sarah turned and said to him, I don't know how to thank you. And Walter said you already did, just by letting me. And he looked at Lily, who was now bright-cheeked and warm, and clutching her leftover fries in a paper bag like a small treasure. And he smiled a smile that reached all the way up to his grey-templed hair. And Sarah walked home through the cold with Lily's hand in hers and felt something she had not felt in 7 months. Not hope exactly, not yet, but the possibility of it, which is sometimes the more important thing. And Lily skipped the last half block and talked about Walter and the Triceratops and the chocolate milk all the way, up the stairs and all through bath time and right up until she fell, asleep mid-sentence, her dark curls fanned out on the pillow and her small face finally at peace. And Sarah sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, looking at her daughter and thinking about how the world can close in so tight that you forget it. Also contains strangers in diners who notice a little girl's eyes and decide quietly and without fanfare to do something about it. And she thought that tomorrow she would go to the community board at the library, like she had been avoiding for months, and look at the listings. And she thought that she would call her sister back, the call she had been putting off. And she thought that things were not fixed. Nothing was fixed. The bills were still there, and the cold was still there, and David was still gone. But that tonight, her daughter had eaten a cheeseburger and talked about dinosaurs with an old man who needed it just as much as they did. And that was not nothing. That was in fact everything. That was the whole story. The only story that ever really matters. The one where someone sees you and decides you are worth seeing. And outside the window, the city hummed and the cold settled in, and somewhere across town, Walter drove home to his quiet house and set his keys on the hook by the door and sat in his armchair and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that the evening had been well spent. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness True Stories, where we bring you real and emotional stories of human kindness that restore your faith in humanity. Every share helps us reach someone who needs to hear these stories today. Thank you for being part of this community.